Hi, I'm Mike Slynn for ScalaCourses.com, and in this lecture, I'm going to show you how to set up IntelliJ IDEA to work with Scala. Let's dive right in. You need to watch the first lecture of this course and install the software mentioned before attempting to follow the instructions of this course. You will also need IDEA 12 Ultimate Edition in order to configure it, and that's available as a free 30-day download from the IntelliJ site. This lecture was produced with IDEA 12.1.3. We will update this whenever setting and configurations change with subsequent releases. Now, first a word about the Scala compiler, Scala C as it's known. It requires a lot more memory than the regular Java compiler does. And so a lot of the settings here discuss memory allocation and ways of measuring that. Some of the options available for configuring the Scala compiler will be removed in subsequent versions of IntelliJ. And that's a good thing because some of the packaging options which are currently available are not as effective as the newer packaging options, and so you really shouldn't be using them anymore. So we're just going to talk about the most appropriate way of setting up the Scala compiler, and those options should continue forward. If you're watching this video, you'll probably want to see the transcript for the video, and the way to do that, if you're not viewing it from our site, is to go to scalacourses.com and then click on the Java Scala Interoperability course, and in that, the object-oriented compatibility. Now you'll see Sections and Lectures tab, and this is the IDEA course, and the video will come up in a sec, but that's a transcript you want to see. So most of the words I speak are written here, plus some other extra information. So I recommend that you watch the video, follow along with IntelliJ IDEA, and also check out the transcript. So let's configure it. I've installed it in a directory which may be different than the installation directory that you have. But the main thing to know here is that in the bin subdirectory, there is a bunch of files, all starting with the word IDEA. IDEA SH is what you would want to launch if you're running the bash shell. Now, if you're running Windows or Mac, you don't care about this. You can just click on the nice shiny icon and it'll run. If you're running it from the command line, you may want to do, as I have done, pipe standard out and standard error to dev null, and then run it in the background. So let's start IntelliJ IDEA. And first thing it does is, if you have a previous version, saying it wants to import the settings. That's a good idea. Let's pretend you don't have any settings, though. I do recommend that you import your settings, but I'm trying to pretend that there are no previous settings. And I'm going to evaluate for 30 days. Yes, I accept all the terms. So it presents you with a number of plugins that you can opt in or out of, and the documentation says that each of these plugins takes a certain amount of memory. I think it's more accurate to say it takes memory the first time you use them, and I think that, at least my experience has been, if you don't use a plugin, it doesn't affect anything you're doing. So you could just make your life easy and skip all of that. Okay, so now we have the IntelliJ IDEA quick start up, and we're not going to make new projects or import projects. Your first move should be to configure. So let's go to configure, and this create desktop entry is unique to Linux. I'm going to click on that so that we have an icon on the desktop. This is not necessary for Windows or Mac. So first of all, let's look at some plugins. There are two different repositories for plugins, and then there are bundled plugins. The bundled plugins can't be uninstalled. And by default, there is a Play framework. This is Play 1.0. Most people have moved on to Play 2.0, and so you don't want this plugin. So I've deselected it. I can't uninstall it, but at least it won't be there anymore. And I will go to the JetBrains plugin repository, and I will get some more plugins here. For example, the Scala plugin. Yes, please download and install. This can run in the background, but I'm not going to run it in the background. I've had bad luck with that. It's best to wait while it downloads, and then you're sure that it actually happened. So we're almost done. And now I'm actually using Play, so I will install the Play plugin as well. And yes, it asks for all the dependencies. I could have just asked for this one plugin, and it would have fetched the Scala plugin as well. However, I wanted to show you the two in case that you are interested in the Scala plugin, but not the Play plugin. So those are the plugins that I'm interested in that are provided by JetBrains. There are some other plugins that I like, which are third-party plugins, and you can just filter this. SBT is a plugin that I find useful. So this allows you to run the SBT REPL inside IntelliJ IDEA. You can always run the REPL on the command line, but it's sometimes handy to do that. And oh yes, I should have also gotten my other friend Markdown. This is a pretty good plugin for your documentation. So we've got all our plugins now. I'll say OK, and it's going to restart. Okay, so now that we go back into the configure menu, and now we're going to look at settings. And there are two groups of settings. One is template project settings. So this is the default for all new projects that you will make. And then there are global IDE settings. And we'll just start at the top and work down. First, we're going to worry about the compiler settings. So external build is a relatively new addition to IntelliJ IDEA. It showed up in a recent version, and that's a good thing. Compiling independent modules in parallel takes more memory, but can sure speed things up, so that's a nice thing to have. Making projects automatically sounds good, but in practice, I have found I'd like to instead hit Control F9, which will build when I'm ready. Imagine you have several files open, and every time you save a file, your project rebuilds. Your computer will become a little more sluggish. That's just not how I work. I work when I'm ready to have a compile, I can press the key. And you can control the amount of memory for the external build here. So why don't we, I've got 7 gigabytes on this machine, this virtual machine, so I'll give it 2 gigabytes right there. Now notice, remember, we're at external build mode, so when I open this up and I go to Scala compiler, it says nothing to show here in external build mode. It's all handled automatically. That's good. Now we can also look at Scala settings down here, and we also have, that's per project now, and there are also Scala settings which are global. So we need to tell it globally what our IDE is, and we have yet to do that. And it's going to run the compiler server. So I can't select because it's none defined yet. So let's go ahead and do that. You need to define a project JDK before you can configure Scala. To do that, we're going to exit this. We'll say OK. Go to Project Defaults, Project Structure, Project Settings, Project. Now it says no SDK. So we'll say New, JDK, and then under Ubuntu Linux, it's going to look by default under User Lib JVM, and that actually is fine. And I'll point it to the symlink here. And there we are, it's found one. I'll say OK, and I'll back up and go back to all the other settings. Oh yes, under Appearance, there's this unique Darkula theme. look what it does. It gives you a nice, easy on the eyes, dark theme. If you stare at the screen all day, many hours, your eyes will get sore if they look at a white screen. So you'll have more endurance if you go with something like Darkula. So here we are in the settings for the IDE, global IDE settings for Scala. And you can see that compile server is enabled for external build mode. And this is where you apply the SDK that was just defined. And you can also increase the amount of memory for that process. So how about 2 gigs? And whatever else you might want to put. The minus server is a good thing to have because this is a long-lived process. The longer it runs, the more efficient it will get. Another setting that I find helpful is under Editor, allow placement of caret after end of line. I don't want that. I turn that off because when I click, I don't want to add a bunch of spaces to a line. I want it to snap to the end of the line. So that's one that is my preference. And we're essentially done. There's a lot more settings, as you can see. You can explore them as you like. We can open a project. Now I've done that. I've got some projects that are already defined. I'm going to just scoot over to one right now. And let's take this one. And I'm also going to launch Java Visual VM. So we're going to look at the memory that IntelliJ is using. And I'll just resize up my screen so you can see everything that's going on. So while that's running, the applications, the Java applications that Java Visual VM have found are itself and IntelliJ. So I'm going to click on IntelliJ, double click on it, that is, and we'll get some information about it. Here are the JVM arguments. And these are actually set in a file. And so I'll just go there. It's in the bin directory, and it's called idea, either idea64.vm options or idea VM options for the 32-bit version. And I've tweaked these values. I've given it more memory. And you can mess around with them as well. I suggest you back this file up before making any changes, because if you do something inexcusable, then IDEA won't start. So you don't want to get caught in that position. So here's my settings, and you can see them reflected here. Now let's see if those are appropriate settings, because it's often been guesswork. If you go to the Monitor tab, there's no more guesswork. You can actually see the heap, what's been allocated in orange, and what's actually being used in blue. You can see your permgen space. 500 megabytes is way too much. I've never seen this go over 200 megabytes. So that's just wasting memory if you give it 500 megabytes. You can see the threads here, how many are live and what the peak is. You can see the number of classes that have been loaded, 25,000. That's not even a big number. For some big projects, you'll see quite a bit more than that. And then the CPU usage. So we're basically trying to optimize the heap. And so here you can actually see as we do a compile. Let's do that. I'll just close this. And I can say build, rebuild project. And now we should see a spike in the CPU, and memory usage should change. Down here we've got 2 processes running, and we also have a warning which says that it's not necessarily going to clean everything. That's fine. You can use this for tuning purposes. We are using only 1.5 gigs of memory, but it's starting to push up at the top, and as time goes by, we'll find out whether this was an appropriate setting or not. So Java Visual VM is a good tool for you to get to know, to see if your application or if your idea itself is got the proper memory allocation. Scala projects commonly use SBT to define the projects, and IntelliJ works well with SBT. If you want to import a Scala project defined in SBT into IntelliJ, there is the gen idea command. So here I am in a directory, the directory for this course, and you'll see that it's got two subdirectories, assignment and course notes. Let's go into course notes and take a look and see what's here. There's a file called build SBT, which is the main definition for the project, the SBT project that is, and there's also some ancillary information inside project. To turn this into an IntelliJ IDEA project is very simple. I say SBT gen idea, and the gen idea subcommand has been defined already in this project, so I can just use it. And now it's going to build me the extra information that IntelliJ IDEA needs. And let's see what directory we're in here. I'll just copy that whole thing. And I'll open that project. Okay, the project's just been opened. And you'll notice often that this will be a little spinning indicator while IDEA indexes jars. Again, if this is the first time that you've run IDEA, this could take several minutes. So be patient, because that will consume a lot of CPU. And when it's done, you'll be able to work effectively with IDEA. So I've just opened up the project panel here on the left. And here's two directories that were created by the Gen IDEA plugin, the .idea directory and IDEA underbar modules. We don't need to look inside those, but it's good to know that what they actually do is that they link to all the dependencies that have been pulled down automatically for you when Gen IDEA ran. And these all live in the .iv2 directory under your home. So they're not copied, there's references to them. Then your source code is here. It's a typical Maven format. And your Scala code is in Scala directory, and if you have Java code, it's in the Java directory. And then if you have tests, that's over here under test directory. That would be unit tests, for example. Project structure. And you can see we've set this previously. And modules we didn't see before because we didn't have a project. Every SBT project has two phases to it, the build and then the project that you're working on. You don't generally need to mess with the build here, so let's just ignore that. It's just there. And then this is your project proper, and your source codes, the source directories are all shown. The Scala entry under that is where this is the compiler for your actual project. There is a separate compiler for the build directory, and whereas I'm using Scala 2.10 for my project, the build system is using the previous version of Scala 2.9.2. Perhaps that will change, but that's just how it is. So it's not an error if you see two versions of Scala. In fact, here they are. Scala 2.9.2, that's for the build system, and Scala 2.10.1 for the actual project that we're working on. Here's some more settings. You generally don't need to mess around with that. And this is information, so I'll just say OK. Now, I can right-click on one of these files. Let's right-click on Scala Java, this is the file it's actually showing now. And when I do that, there are some run icons. I can run without debugging, or I can actually debug, and then I can do a code coverage analysis. Debug is something you'll probably be doing a lot of, hopefully not too much. And you can see that the debug window opened up. And let me just move this so Ubuntu's helpful, friendly menu system isn't in the way, being ever so helpful and friendly. You can put a breakpoint somewhere, and you can run your project again. And of course, it stops at the breakpoint, and your variables are to be found inside this quite often. There aren't any variables yet, so let's just go down a little further, and we'll have some variables that we can actually look at. Oops. So this outer, okay, so we should have something called X. There it is. And here's your call stack. You can step forward, all the things that you would expect. We can also look at definitions. So for example, we could look at app, and I could push function key 3, which is the Eclipse binding, and take a look at the source code. Let's look at some hotkeys. Hovering is very useful in IntelliJ, and if you hold down the control key, it will show you all kinds of useful information. And you can click on some of the things that it shows you, and you get basically what you would see in JavaDoc. Not all the comments, but a whole lot of information, and you can configure it if you like, different font sizes, bigger, smaller. You can walk around, and you can also go to a definition just by clicking straight on the object. I can explore all kinds of things. I can pin it here so that it remains. I don't really want that. Now, if I have an expression, I can highlight a part of the expression and hit Alt equals. And it says that's a list of int. Did you see that? I'll do it again. List of int. It just pops up for a second. And if I highlight some more, then it tells me it's a list of tuples. Each of the element of the tuple is itself an int. Here, I'll do it one more time so you can see that. And if I hit the whole expression, it says it's a map with the keys being ints and the values being a list of tuples with ints in them. So Alt equals is very handy to have. Now, you can also do Control Space, and it will show you its code completion. In this case, it's showing me all the methods that are defined. This is not necessarily everything that's possible. It's pretty good, but you shouldn't think that this is definitely always the only option. And IDEA is a very good IDE, but it's not perfect, and this is one of the areas that you should actually check your documentation sometimes. The JavaDoc or the Scala doc is authoritative. This is not. Now, we can rebuild a project with a Control B, and when you rebuild it, it's rebuilding now, as you can see. When you rebuild it, it doesn't necessarily clean completely. If you really want it to clean, the only way to be sure that you are going to clean is to say SBT clean. And that truly is clean. So don't trust anything else if you want to start from a clean slate. There are more keys that I've put together for your notes, and that's not a complete list either. There are quite a few that you could get to know. Certainly all of the Eclipse key bindings would be helpful, as well as the special IntelliJ key bindings. There's one more thing that you should be aware of. Here's your run configurations. And if I edit that, it's shared. So when it's shared, there's an actual file written, an XML file from this definition, and you can check that into your source code if you want to. And if everybody's got the same sort of path structure, then that would be helpful. Well, that's all the time we have for now. I hope you've enjoyed learning about IntelliJ IDEA. There's lots more this IDE can do. We've barely begun to scratch the surface. As you can see, it's extremely powerful and friendly to use. I hope you've enjoyed this free video, and there are dozens more in this course. Please go to scalacourses.com and sign up. Thank you.